Journey to the Chapter Center of the Earth, Chapter 3 by Jules Verne. An astounding discovery. "What is the matter?" cried the cook, entering the room. "When will master have his dinner?" "Never." "And his supper?" "I don't know. He says he will eat no more. Neither shall I. My uncle has determined to fast and make me fast until he makes out this abominable inscription," I replied. "You will be starved to death," she said. I was very much of the same opinion, but not liking to say so, sent her away and began some of my usual work of classification. But try as I might, nothing could keep me from thinking alternately of the stupid manuscript and of the pretty Gretchen. Several times I thought of going out, but my uncle would have been angry at my absence. At the end of an hour, my allotted task was done. How to pass the time? I began by lighting my pipe. Like all other students, I delighted in tobacco, and seating myself in the great armchair, I began to think. This is far prior to the Surgeon General and finding out the long-term health benefits of tobacco, which is not encouraged. Where was my uncle? I could easily imagine him tearing along some solitary road, gesticulating, talking to himself, cutting the air with his cane, and still thinking of the absurd bit of hieroglyphics. Would he hit upon some clue? Would he come home in a better humor? While these thoughts were passed through my brain, I mechanically took up the execrable puzzle and tried every imaginable way of grouping the letters. I put them together by twos, by threes, fours, and fives. In vain. Nothing intelligible came out, except that the 14th, 15th, and 16th made ice in English, and the 84th, 85th, and 86th the word sir. Then at last I seemed to find the Latin words rota, mutable, ira, nec, and atra. Ha! There seems to be some truth to my uncle's notion, thought I. Then again I seemed to find the word luca, which means sacred wood. Then in the third line I appeared to make out labiled, a perfect Hebrew word. And at last the two syllables mir, ar, mer, which are French. It was enough to drive one mad. 4 different idioms in this absurd phrase. What connection could there be between ice, sir, anger, cruel, sacred, wood, changing, mother, R, and C? The first and the last might, in a sentence, be connected with Iceland, meaning sea of ice, but what of the rest of this monstrous cryptograph? I was, in fact, fighting against the insurmountable difficulty. My brain was almost on fire. My eyes were strained with staring at the parchment. The whole absurd collection of letters appeared to dance before my vision in a number of black little groups. My mind was possessed with temporary hallucination. I was stifling. I wanted air. Mechanically, I fanned myself with the document, of which I now saw the back and then the front. Imagine my surprise when, glancing at the back of the wearisome puzzle, the ink having gone through, I clearly made out the Latin words, amongst others, craterum and terrestre. I had discovered the secret. It came upon me like a flash of lightning. I had got the clue. All you had to do to understand the document was to read it backwards. All the ingenious ideas of the professor were realized. He had dictated it rightly to me. By mere accident, I had discovered what he so much desired. My delight, my emotion may be imagined. My eyes were dazzled, and I trembled, so that at first I could make nothing of it. One look, however, would tell me all I wished to know. "Let me read," I said to myself, after drawing a long breath. I spread it before me on the table, passed my finger over each letter. I spelled it through in my excitement and read it out. What horror and stupefaction took possession of my soul. I was like a man who had received a knockdown blow. Was it possibly that I had really read the terrible secret and that it had really been accomplished? A man had dared to do what? No living being should ever know. "Never," cried I, jumping up. "Never shall my uncle be made aware of this dread secret. He would be quite capable of undertaking the terrible journey. Nothing would check him. Nothing would stop him. Worse, he would compel me to accompany him, and we should be lost forever. But no, such folly and madness cannot be allowed." I was almost beside myself with rage and fury. "My worthy uncle is already nearly mad," I cried aloud. "This would finish him. By some accident he may take the discovery, in which case we are both lost. Perish the fearful secret. Let the flames forever bury it in oblivion." I snatched up the book and parchment and was about to cast them into the fire when the door opened and my uncle entered. I had scarcely put down the wretched documents before my uncle was by my side. He was profoundly absorbed. His thoughts were evidently bent on the terrible parchment. Some new combination had probably struck him while he was taking his walk. He seated himself in the armchair and with a pen began to make an algebraical calculation. I watched him with anxious eyes. My flesh crawled as it became probable that he would discover the secret. His combinations, I knew now, were useless. I, having discovered the only clue, for 3 mortal hours he continued without speaking a word, without raising his head, scratching, rewriting, calculating over and over again. I knew that in time he must hit upon the right phrase. The letters of every alphabet have only a certain number of combinations. But then years might elapse before he would arrive at the correct solution. Still, time went on. Night came. The sounds on the street ceased. And still my uncle went on, not even answering our worthy cook when she called us to supper. I did not dare leave him, so waved her away and at last fell asleep on the sofa. When I awoke, my uncle was still at work. His red eyes, his pallid countenance, his matted hair, his feverish hands, his hectically flushed cheeks showed how terribly he had been at his struggle with the impossible, and what fearful fatigue he had undergone during that long, sleepless night. It made me quite ill to look at him. Though he was rather severe with me, I loved him, and my heart ached at his suffering. He was so overcome by one idea that he could not even get it in a passion. All his energies were focused on one point. And I knew that by speaking one little word, all this suffering would soon cease. I could not speak it. My heart was nevertheless inclined toward him. Why then did I remain silent? In the interest of my uncle himself. Nothing shall make me speak, I muttered. He will want to follow in the footsteps of the other. I know him well. His imagination is a perfect volcano, and to make discoveries in the interest of geology, he would sacrifice his life. I will therefore be silent and strictly keep the secret I have discovered. To reveal it would be suicidal. He would not only rush himself to destruction, but drag me with him. I crossed my arms, looked one way and then the other, and then resolved never to speak. When our cook wanted to go out to the market or any other errand, she found the front door locked and the key taken away. So having just come from Europe, most of the doors there, they lock with the key, and you leave the key in there. So if you want to get out, you also need the key. Was this done purposely or not? Surely Professor Hardwick did not intend the old woman and myself to become martyrs to his obstinate will. Were we to be starved to death? A frightful recollection came to my mind. Once we had fed on bits and scraps for a week while he sorted some curiosities. It gave me the cramp to even think of it. I wanted my breakfast and saw no way of getting it. Still, my resolution held good. I would starve rather than yield, but the cook began to take me seriously to task. What was to be done? She could not go out, and I dared not. My uncle continued counting and writing. His imagination seemed to have translated him to the skies. He neither thought of eating nor drinking. In this way, 12 o'clock came round. I was hungry and there was nothing in the house. The cook had eaten the last bit of bread. This could not go on. It did, however, until 2, when my sensations were terrible. After all, I began to think of the document very absurd. Perhaps it might only be one gigantic hoax. Besides, some means would surely be found to keep my uncle back from attempting such an absurd expedition. On the other hand, if he did attempt anything so quixotic, I should not be compelled to accompany him. Another line of reasoning partially decided me. Very likely he would make the discovery himself. Then I should have suffered starvation for nothing. Under the influence of hunger, this reasoning appeared admirable. I determined to tell all. The question now arose as to how it was to be done. I was still dwelling on the thought when he rose up and put on his hat. What? Go out and lock us in? Never. Uncle, I began. He did not appear to hear me. Professor Hardwick, I cried. What? He retorted. Did you speak? How about the key? What key? The key of the door? No, of these horrible hieroglyphics. He looked at me from under his spectacles and started at the odd expression of my face. Rushing forward, he clutched me by the arm and keenly examined my countenance. His very look was an interrogation. I simply nodded. With an incredulous shrug of the shoulders, he turned upon his heel. Undoubtedly, he thought I had gone mad. I have made a very important discovery. His eyes flashed with excitement. His hand was lifted in a menacing attitude. For a moment, neither of us spoke. It is hard to say which was most excited. You don't mean to say that you have any idea of the meaning of the scrawl? I do, was my desperate reply. Look at the sentence as dictated by you. Well, but it means nothing, was the angry answer. Nothing if you read it from left to right. But mark, if from right to left... Backwards, cried my uncle in wild amazement. Oh, most cunning Saknessam. And I to be such a blockhead. He snatched up the document, gazed at it with a haggard eye, and read it out, as I had done. It read as follows. In Sneffels, Ioculus, Craterum Chem Delibat, Umbra Scartaris, Julii intra calendis descende, Audis viator et terrestre centrum attinges, Codfici. Signed, Arne Secnessum. Which dog Latin, being translated, read as follows. Descend into the crater of Yokel of Sneffels, which the shade of Scartaris caresses before the calends of July, audacious traveler, and you will reach the center of the earth. I did it. My uncle leapt 3 feet from the ground with joy. He looked radiant and handsome. He rushed about the room, wild with delight and satisfaction. He knocked over tables and chairs. He threw his books about until at last, utterly exhausted, he fell into his armchair. What's o'clock? He asked. About 3. My dinner does not seem to have done me much good, he observed. Let me have something to eat. We can then start at once. Get my portmanteau ready. What for? And your own, he continued. We start at once. My horror may be conceived. I resolved, however, to show no fear. Scientific reasons were the only ones likely to influence my uncle. Now, there were many against this terrible journey. The very idea of going down into the center of the earth was simply absurd. I determined, therefore, to argue the point after dinner. My uncle's rage was now directed against the cook for having no dinner ready. My explanation, however, satisfied him, and having gotten the key, she soon contrived to get sufficient to satisfy our voracious appetites. During the repast, my uncle was rather gay than otherwise. He made some of those peculiar jokes which belong exclusively to the learned. As soon, however, as dessert was over, he called me to his study. We each took a chair on the opposite sides of the table. Henry, he said, in a soft and winning voice, I have always believed you ingenious, and you have rendered me a service never to be forgotten. Without you, this wondrous discovery would never have been made. It is my duty, therefore, to insist on your sharing the glory. He is in good humor, I thought. I'll soon let him know my opinion of the glory. In the first place, he continued, you must keep the whole affair a profound secret. There is no more envious race of men than scientific discoverers. Many would start on the same journey. At all events, we would be the first in the field. I doubt you're having many competitors, was my reply. That was a joke, if anyone didn't get the humor. A man of real scientific requirements would be delighted at the chance. We should find the perfect stream of pilgrims on the traces of Arne Saknessum, if this document were once made public. But, my dear sir, is this paper very likely to be a hoax? I urged. The book in which we find it is sufficient proof of its authenticity, he replied. I thoroughly allow that the celebrated professor wrote the lines, but only, I believe, as a kind of mystification, was my answer. Scarcely were the words out of my mouth when I was sorry I had uttered them. My uncle looked at me with a dark and gloomy scowl, and I began to be alarmed for the results of our conversation. His mood soon changed, however, and a smile took the place of a frown. We shall see, he remarked, with decisive emphasis. But see, what is this all about Yokel and Sneffels and the Scartaris? I have never heard anything about them. The very point to which I am coming. I lately received, from my friend Augustus Peterman of Leipzig, a map. Take down the third atlas from the second shelf, Series Z, plates 4. I rose, went to the shelf, and presently returned with the volume indicated. This, said my uncle, is one of the best maps of Iceland. I believe it will settle all your doubts, difficulties, and objections. With a grim hope to the contrary, I stooped over the map. End of chapter 3.